Now I would like to call our first keynote speaker, Dr. Daisy William, from Australia, who has over 25 years of experience in business development and English language instruction, currently serving as ELICOS Program Director at Excelsior College, Australia. Daisy William, please.
Good morning. I want to first acknowledge the owners, Mr. Awais Rouse and his wife, Amara, Mr. Javed Jabbar, Dr. Syed Raghab Ali, and Dr. Sapna Mumtaz. And like what you said earlier, my brother, I hope I've not offended anyone that I've not acknowledged. So today my talk is going to be on, as soon as the presentation goes on, a financial management and corporate governance model for South Asia. So this research I did was in 4 parts. So the data collection was 4 parts of data collection. Purpose of this study is to explore the role of corporate financial control and governance mechanisms in the successful financial management of small not-for-profit organizations in Australia. The principles can be used in other countries. Now, a lot of you young people will go on to work in the not-for-profit sector. Now, you see, people, especially the younger ones, are looking away from just, profiteering and looking at contributing something back to society. So the not-for-profit sector is a large sector that is very important. In Australia, there are over 600,000 not-for-profits. However, one part of that sector, which small not-for-profits, are almost forgotten. And when I researched the whole world, there were so few governance mechanisms, or rather none, no literature even on small not-for-profits. This research stems from a few pressing issues in the industry that have impacted on the not-for-profit. Some of these issues are the closing down of valuable services due to a lack of funds, the constant survival mode that small not-for-profits are working under, and the difficulty in attracting skilled directors. Now, this is an example in America. This organization was founded by a Nobel Prize laureate, and it was called Hull House. It helped it helped immigrant women mainly be educated in English, in food supply. They gave them a lot of support. And because it was so well established since 1889, that it was heavily funded. And what happened is that, how many were there? 300 workers got a message, an email saying that they don't have a job anymore. So people started to question. There were bankers on the board. There were top CEOs. What happened? How did they govern the organization that it ended up having to close down? But the board said, hey, it was the financial crisis. But when they went and looked at the tax declaration in years before, they saw that it was already being badly managed financially. Currently, there's a large volume of studies for best practice and code of conduct for large not-for-profit, but limited literature specifically for small not-for-profit organizations. Now, what is a small not-for-profit? In Australia, is any turnover less than $250,000. And they have limited governance. to safeguard their interests. There's no oversight. They are only required to submit a financial summary. Unlike, so let's look at this scenario. One is large corporation, for-profit corporation. Small corporation, for-profit. Large not-for-profit, small not-for-profit. Now, can you see the large corporation, they have shareholders. Shareholders make their board accountable. Large companies, they have to provide audited report financials to the government. Large not-for-profit have to do audited financials. Small not-for-profit is escaping all these monitoring. They don't need to do an audit report. They don't have members because they are a not-for-profit. They do have members, they don't have owners. So can you see they are completely running under the radar? Now here comes agency theory. If you are a small company, you are the owner. So there's no conflict because the owner and the controlling body are the same. So you work towards the best interests of your organization. Unfortunately, small not-for-profit, the CEO and the board are not owners. So it's easy for them to not be good, not be accountable, not do the right things, especially if they're not required to do an audit report, they're not required to be monitored by the administering body. So these are the four, I'm not going to read out all the questions, the four research questions that came out from the study. So, do small not-for-profit have robust financial management? Do they have good governance mechanisms? Validity and reliability has to be tested and retested until we are solely working with small not-for-profit data. Because, like I told you, there's so much information on large and collective not-for-profit, but nothing for small. So the methodology I had to use, when I researched the literature, nothing. I saw maybe one in America about small not-for-profits and how to fundraise, but nothing else for small. So this group, all over the world, is escaping monitoring and being accountable. Can you go back? So since literature was void, I had to take all the ones that were already in existence for large, analyze each principle and see whether they were relevant for small. If they were not, they were discarded. If they were relevant, I accepted them. Then, using that questions, using those corporate governance principles, I turned them into questions. Then I interviewed CEOs of small not-for-profits. Then the data was analyzed using SPSS. After analyzing the data, we found significant statements. Using the significant statements, I turned into questions. And I sent out requests through ACNC. ACNC is Australian Not-for-Profit and Charities Commission. Through ACNC, I contacted member organizations, sent them an invitation to take part in an interview. I interviewed 10 organizations, and then from that, I chose one to do the case study. So you can see theoretical framework, online survey, in-depth interview to case study. And this is what I meant in the previous slide. For validity and reliability, the data was tested, retested, until we are solely talking about small not-for-profit organizations. So I used mixed methodology. So they were qualitative and quantitative. So this is the research design. So current practice, literature review, first line of inquiry, second line of inquiry, analysis of data, third line of inquiry, fourth line. From the interpretation of the findings, I wrote, because I was involved in industry as well as academia. So I'm not only an academic that does research, I was heavily involved in industry. So what I did is I didn't want to just do a research that doesn't have real life implications. So you can see the last two things there. I wrote a model of best practice for small not-for-profit organizations and also code of conduct for directors. So I've already told you what I did. We had, so the first line of inquiry is theoretical framework. I've already talked about it. Second line of inquiry, online survey. I sent through SurveyMonkey invitation to CEOs of 308 small not-for-profits. Only 127 responded. But out of that 127, 21 of them started the survey but didn't complete. So that became unusable. But from it, we found 34.42% respondent. So literature says for web interviews, surveys, and what was the other one? Web-based and postal questionnaires, if you get 20% response, it's considered valid. So mine had 34.42% response rate. So the third line of inquiry is 10 in-depth interviews. Now, a call-out was made through online platform of Australia's Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission. 12 chairpersons responded, but 2 declined at a later stage. Fourth line of inquiry, one of the case studies was very one of the interviews was very disturbing. So I wanted to do a case study. Yeah. Findings from the 10 interviews. Look at that. Findings from the 10 interviews. Problematic practices which are comparable to criminal behavior such as intimidation, harassment, mismanagement of funds, and other corrupt practices, such as putting pressure on directors to change their vote and manipulation of corporate records. 100% of the organization, it looks like a big number, 100%, but in other words, it was the 10 organizations interviewed had directors that did not know how to interpret financial record. All directors must understand how to read the financials. If not, how can they make responsible decisions? 90% of the organizations interviewed were closing down or had been in the verge of closing down. 40% of the organization were closing down that were closing down could have continued their operation if they had partnered with other organizations. Transparency, declaration of conflict of interest, confidentiality, integrity are some of the codes that the interviewees felt must be included in a code of conduct. So what I did is I asked them, I'm planning to write a code of conduct. What do you think should be included? What do you think is important having worked with your team? So, you know, the second line of inquiry survey were only to CEOs, but the interview were to chairpersons. there is a need for a code of conduct for directors that clearly stipulates consequences. So not enough, not good enough to just have code of conduct, but include in the code what is the ripple effect if you don't follow. Are there fines? Are there you disbar them as members? What happens? 80% of the organizations did not have successful director recruitment process. And look, some of the things that the chairperson said, we had rogues on the board. We hope for the best when directors are elected. We went to hell and back because of the previous board. Our board was dysfunctional. There was infighting and aggressive behavior at board meetings. Outcome, the scenario presented a weak and volatile sector that was in a precarious state. It needed much attention. Because of that, I wrote the two codes. One was Code of Conduct for Directors, and the second one was Best Practice for Small Not-for-Profits. So what was the best practice? It must have well-structured governance relationship between the chair and the CEO, because sometimes you have a board, and in small not-for-profits, you have a board, you have a CEO. You have a CEO who really makes good changes. Suddenly, someone on the board is eyeing the job of this person because it's growing financially, they have donations, whatnot. So there must be a good relationship. A board of directors of small not-for-profit must actively engage in formal evaluation of its programs and the CEO's performance. A small not-for-profit must have an effective board member recruitment and orientation, not my friend becomes the chair. Not the chair, the CEO. Not my brother is my assistant. So, you have real good structures, everyone working together. It must have a statement of mission, vision, activities. It must exercise due diligence by being informed of matters pertaining to transaction when reviewing them. Transparency was important. Now, when books are reviewed, like the financials, they must be reviewed for audit purposes too. And it's good for small not-for-profits. Even though they are not required, it's good for them to actually do the audit process. And change your auditors every 3 or 4 years so that you have new eyes looking at it. So members should be given the financial report in advance so that they can look at it. A small not-for-profit organization must meet its disclosure deadlines. Directors on not-for-profits be independent of each other. And this is an issue especially in small country towns. Oh, I play tennis with you every week. Come join my board. You can't have that. So lastly is the code of conduct. How should the board of directors behave? Exercise integrity. Be loyal to the organization. Be accountable to their members. Declare conflicts of interest. Treat others with respect. Separate governance responsibility from management role. Act fairly and equitably. Do not make public comments without the board's consent. Maintain confidentiality. So in the end, the consequences of not following was also documented. So now you have something solid for small not-for-profits. And it went through the whole rigorous data collections and reliability exercise. Then at the end, for the practitioners outside, there is a best practice, there's a code of conduct. And lastly, there are consequences. Thank you.